If you're in the room for the Aquatic Foods for Healthy and Resilient School Food Systems, you're in the right space. We have two panel presenters today who will share some of their work, and then we're going to do a workshopping activity that will feed into our declaration and the work around thinking what's next for the region, as well as some research that's going on as well. So, without further ado, I'm going to invite our first panel speaker, Mr. Tibio Tampton, who is a food technologist researcher with the College of the Marshall Islands. And he's going to talk to us about introducing and promoting the consumption of sea grapes to elementary schools in the Marshall Islands, case studies for selected schools within Majuro Atoll. And then we will move on to our second presenter. So, Tibio, when you're ready, the floor is yours.
Start to start. Okay, Bula, Blavinak, everyone. Yakwe, Melody. So this afternoon I'll be presenting a little bit about my work. It's a work in progress, so bear with me. So the topic, oops, sorry. So I'll be talking about the introduction and promotion of the consumption of sea grapes to elementary schools in the Marshall Islands. It's a case study for a few schools there. So this is the content of my presentation. I'll be talking on background information based on the institutions that I work for, introduction of the research and the extension work on sea grapes, the methodology used, initial findings, and the conclusion and way forward. So first, I would like to introduce you to College of Marshall Islands. So, College of Micronesia land grant, which was established back in the 1980s from the Compact of Free Association, if you're familiar with that, and is funded by the National Institute of Food and Agriculture, NIFA. And right now, there's 3 members. Of course, you have the College of the Marshall Islands, College of Micronesia, FSM, and Palau Community College. And the focus of our work at Land Grant is based on 6 critical issues. The lack of local food production, high incidence of food and waterborne illnesses, aquaculture, climate change, youth and family health, and child obesity. So this research, or the research I'm doing on sea grapes, so edible seaweed, is based on the first 2, the lack of local food production and the high incidence of food and waterborne illnesses. So my research is based on exploring the potential of edible seaweeds in the food system of the Marshall Islands. And the objectives is to identify existing edible species of seaweed in the Marshall Islands, promote and optimize post-harvest and consumption, and to preserve and maintain food and nutrient security. But I'm not going to talk about this research because I'll be talking more on the extension part, which is to do with school meals. So from that research I mentioned earlier, this is an extension part of my work, and it's to do with the title is introducing and promoting consumption of sea grapes in elementary schools. So sea grapes, the species that we have in the Marshall Islands is yet to be confirmed. There are 2 varieties. I can't really pronounce this, Coleba lentifilera, and there's another Coleba racemosa. But in the Pacific, we call them, in the Marshall Islands, we call it grape in Lojet. In Fiji, it's called Nama. In Kiribati, we call it grape bentari. And in Samoan, it's Limu Puafua, if that's pronounced correctly. And the objective of the study of this extension is to increase awareness on sea grapes, health benefits and risk because the health benefits, and there are some risk. And then promotion and exploration of its inclusion in school foods, and to identify critical needs of sea grapes introduction or some gaps. So sea grapes, the benefit of sea grapes maybe some of you have known this. It's a superfood because of these health benefits. It has omega-3 fatty acid, minerals like calcium, iodine, magnesium, potassium. There's also vitamin and dietary fiber. However, for seaweed or sea grapes in the Marshall Islands or anywhere in the world, there are some food safety risks associated with it, and this include pathogenic growth for Salmonella and Vibrio, for example. And then we have harmful or algal bloom, which refers to toxic phytoplankton that could get stuck with sea grapes if the environment is not that good, not pristine. And then you have heavy metal contamination for cadmium, lead, or mercury. And there's also concern of iodine in seaweed and eye sodium, for hypertension. So basically what I'm doing right now is I'm going to start off with analyzing not really analyzing, but collecting samples and sending them to Fiji because there's a reference laboratory here in Fiji, in Suva actually. So samples to determine if there are pathogenic growth or heavy metals, right? After that, I'll create some information and education and communication materials, like presenting here or pamphlets and fact sheet on sea grapes. The third step next will be a school visit to teachers, vendors, and students when possible. And then the fourth one is to sensitize or introduce or increase awareness on sea grapes. Fifth one is to develop an implementation plan with stakeholders. And the last one would be to execute or implement that plan. So for the initial findings, like I mentioned earlier, this is a work in progress. This part is really on the school food in the RMI, and I have Kenzo there to thank if you can provide some clarification if there are some gaps in this finding here. So for school meals in the Marshall Islands, we have the National Committee that works with schools it's the Ministry of Education and the Ministry of Finance, and then they have this application process, step 2, where vendors, submit their letter of interest, to be considered. Then when those who are successfully selected will be given contract to provide food or meals. And then you have monitoring, which Kenzo mentioned earlier, like spot checks. The second, the initial finding on IEC materials is to ensure that when you're developing the IEC materials, you make sure that you bring, you mentioned facts, right? Factual information on sea grapes, not just the good parts, but also the bad side, like some of the risk associated with sea grapes. And the next one is to incorporate simple recipe for sea grapes. In the Marshall Island, we don't eat sea grapes. Not anyone is familiar with it. So developing a recipe in line or with not really in line, but in association, getting communities to develop that recipe through sensory analysis would be nice, And then you can do salads or snacks, and even add fish and seafood like tuna, for example. It also needs to include a training materials for food handlers, teachers, and students. And when the last one is to make sure it's translated for those who needs translation for the materials, So basically, so opportunities, like I mentioned earlier, could be the nutritional benefit, and then diversification of diets, supporting livelihoods. In terms of challenges, there's no data right now about how much sea grapes we have in the Marshall Islands. And then there's also the challenge about taste because people are not used to it. So you need some sensory analysis at some point. And the other challenge is it has a short shelf life, right? It really get spoiled easily. And then there are concerns of food safety risks. So this is, okay, so one of the findings as well on school visits is visiting the schools and talking with teachers and to principals. So this is basically what I've analyzed from like a survey kind. I just went and interviewed one of the teachers and the principal, And this is what based on that survey, So the schools are currently providing school meals They have breakfast and lunches from local vendors, and sea grapes is new to them and it's not being included. I mean, it's a novel food for the Marshall Islands. So there's an opportunity to introduce sea grapes in the school food menu, but it needs proper awareness. And the last one is, well, I mean, based on the Jesus interviews, is the sensory analysis that could be explored for students and teachers. And one of the recommendation from the teachers is to at least put, if it's gonna be done, maybe once a week or once in every fortnight will do, if it's gonna be like a pilot study kind of. And in terms of what the food vendors, the interview with the vendors at one of the local schools, again, they're not familiar. I mean, this vendor is actually familiar with sea grapes, but he doesn't know if there's plenty, if there's a lot in Majuro. And the second one is that there is interest to include it, but limited knowledge on how to prepare it well. And the third one is in terms of frequency, like I mentioned earlier, like once a week or once a fortnight would be reasonable regarding, especially on the supply and demand. And the last one is while interest and motivation is there, the final say has to be from the PSS or the Ministry of Education to approve. So in conclusion, the introduction of sea grapes in food meals in the Marshall Islands is can be possible, but it's a work in progress at the moment, and it could benefit our children in schools in the Marshall Islands. But challenges exist that can be addressed, and this could be done through stock assessment for sea grapes for a start, to see how many sea grapes are there. Food safety management systems to be incorporated. Awareness on health benefits. Awareness on food preparations or recipes. Stakeholder engagements and others. So as a way forward, in the table on the right, so for school communities, there's a need to increase awareness on the health benefits of sea grapes, plus the risk. And there's also a need for capacity building for teachers and vendors. Sensory analysis for students and consumers to optimize taste and preferences, and exploring this possibility with PSS or Ministry of Education. For the school committee that is being chaired by the PSS, there's also a need to increase awareness on the health benefits of sea grapes, collaborate with them and other stakeholders on planning and implementing a school food meals that include sea grapes, and to also ensure that pilot schools are officially selected and approved by the national bodies. Yeah, you don't just go and just pick any school you want. But as a researcher, I'll make sure that this priority given to schools that have been visited. And of course, this study or this extension needs to follow ethics and standards for human subject and engagement on sensory analysis. From the College of Marshall Islands, we have this Institute of Review Board with reviews your research and extensive work when you're dealing with, when you're using humans in your study, yeah? So that's it from me.
Thanks so much, Tibio. I think that's given us a lot of food for thought in terms of some of the foods that maybe people are not seeing on the menu very often in schools. So really fascinating. And I think that intersection with food safety is something that sometimes is missed a little bit in the discussions that we have. So it's fantastic that's been highlighted. We're going to move to our second speaker now. We have Elodie Casey, who is a PhD candidate from University of the Sunshine Coast, and she's going to present on From Evidence to Dialogue, Advancing Aquatic Foods in Pacific Islands School Food Environments. So I will hand over to you, Elodie. You just need to, this one's, yeah. Thank you.
Hello. welcome and thank you for being here today. So my name is Elodie Casey, and Sarah just said, I'm a PhD candidate at UniSC, and my doctoral project examined the role of aquatic food in the Pacific Island school food environment. Today, I'm going to walk you through what my project covers and what the literature is currently telling us and where I think the gaps are. So my PhD has three interconnected studies: systematic scoping review, which is a systematic mapping of the academic and grey literature on aquatic food within the school food environment of the Pacific small island developing states. It is now completed and it's in a writing stage. Study 2 is a field case study, which involved working directly with communities. We finished the data collection just last week across 3 remote coastal communities in Fiji, and I am now about to start sorting and analyzing the data. And study 3 is the workshop in which you will participate shortly. Your input will become part of that research, and it will feed into my final synthesis alongside what we found in the literature and in the field. So the aim of study 1 was to map how the inclusion of aquatic food in the Pacific school food environment has been documented and to determine the barriers and opportunity for greater integration. I would also like to define the terms you will hear me use repeatedly. So when I refer to aquatic food, I'm talking about animals, plants, and microorganisms that are farmed or harvested in water, as well as cell-based and plant-based food emerging from new technologies. That covers finfish, shellfish, crustacean, mollusks, and edible seaweed and algae, like sea crabs, from marine or freshwater systems that are wild-caught or farmed. And then the school food environment, which refers to all the spaces, infrastructure, and condition within and around the school premises, where food is available, obtained, purchased, or consumed. That include tuck shop, kiosks, canteens, vendors, vending machine. It also covers nutritional contents of those foods, the information and promotion around them, as well as policies and guidelines. In other words, it's everything that shapes what children eat at school, not just the meals themselves. So what did we find out? Study 1 set out to map the documented literature on the role of aquatic food in Pacific Island school food environment. We systematically gathered evidence available, which was research paper, government report, policy document, guidelines, etc. We extracted 101 documents from 18 islands and territories. Notably, 2 jurisdictions in our inclusion list returned no results. That was Niue and Tuvalu. The first things worth noting is that this evidence base is predominantly grey literature. It was about 79%. And that reflects how school food in the Pacific tends to be documented through government and organizational reports rather than peer-reviewed journals, which affect how findable and comparable the information is. In terms of content, just under half of the documents mention some form of aquatic foods, and 65% discussed a school food program, but only around 1/3 mentioned both school feeding program and aquatic foods. The country level breakdown also illustrates some disparities about the evidence itself. Fiji has the largest single country footprint in the review with 15 documents, but aquatic food appeared only in 2 of them. Timor-Leste, on the other hand, returned 10 documents and aquatic food came up in 60% of them. That contrast doesn't necessarily tell us actually what's happening in school plates, but it tells us what's been documented and suggests what aquatic food appears to have been considered relevant enough to write about. So of the 65% of documents that reference a school food program, around 25% actively include or promote aquatic food within it, as in there is some description of how fish or other aquatic food are part of what's offered, whether in a menu, a guideline, or procurement mechanism. A further 12% also mentioned aquatic food, but without describing a real integration. It was more of a passing reference or food group category, but nothing more specific. And finally, 63% of document program in this review did not mention aquatic food at all. I want to be careful with interpreting these numbers though. A document that doesn't mention aquatic food doesn't necessarily mean it isn't being served, but it does suggest that most of the documented program we reviewed, aquatic food are neither promoted or emphasized. So the literature also provides a fairly consistent picture of why integration is limited. The same barriers come across countries and document types. Cold chain and refrigeration infrastructure were the most cited constraints. Getting aquatic food to a school safely, particularly in remote setting, is a recurring challenge. Transport and logistics pose also a related challenge, one that becomes harder to manage across diverse island territories. Costs come up repeatedly as well, though it's worth noting how it's framed in the literature. One document, for example, described it specifically as a perception of higher cost for fresh fish compared to imported processed alternative, rather than a documented price comparison. Supply consistency and seasonal availability are also noted across multiple documents, as is food safety, such as bone content. One document, for example, from Timor-Leste, identified bone content as a genuine barrier to mother acceptance of fish in school meal. And dependence on import and displacement of fresh local fish by canned alternative completes the pictures. The literature also suggests some opportunities, but with much less consistency and rarely with operational details. Tech school gardens, for example, they were mentioned in 21 documents, indicating that school-based food production is being explored, but to what extent could this be extended to aquatic food provision? Fish pond and some small-scale aquaculture appear occasionally, but the link between what's grown or raised on school ground and what ends up on a plate is underreported. Local fishery linkage, farm-to-school procurement model, and capacity building for school catering staff also appears across multiple documents, mostly framed as a need rather than a solution in place. The clearest example of an opportunity translated into practice is French Polynesia 2021 Nutrition Guideline, which set enforceable minimum quota and frequency requirement for locally sourced fish in school menu. However, it's rather an exception. Most of what the literature describes sits at the level of recommendation, and cross-sector coordination between education, health, fishery, and agriculture is a recurring suggestion, but it is just as often described as difficult to achieve. So our scoping review presents a reasonable picture of what the published grey literature has documented and highlight the gaps in the evidence base. But a review of the literature is limited to what exists on paper, and not everything is documented. What it cannot capture is the knowledge and experience of the people working within the school food environment. That's where this research goes next. And so I will now hand it back to Sarah, and I will see you in a few minutes.
Thank you so much, Elodie. I think that gives us a really nice overview of what we know in the literature around the use of aquatic foods in schools across the region. But obviously, being the blue continent, there's lots of potential for the integration of aquatic foods. So I'm not going to take too much time talking about summing up those presentations now, because we're going to move into a workshop where you can do a bit of thinking and talking and moving around. And Elodie is going to facilitate that for you as well. So now that you've sat down, you have to get all the way back up, Elodie, and come on up again.
Thank you. So for this workshop, if you would like to fill up the tables, maybe, because we are a bit short in sticky notes. Thanks. Jenna, in one of it on the table. Sorry. It needs to be one pink and one green. Like one stack of pink, one stack of green. Oh, how many people? Doesn't matter. It's just we're limited. Yes, exactly. Very good. All right. Well, thank you for staying for the workshop. As you just heard in my presentation, this part of the session is the third and final study of my PhD, and your input is crucial to obtaining comprehensive, up-to-date picture. So I'm keen to hear what you have to say. Before we get into the discussion, a quick word on how your input will be used, what goes on the card, and the patterns we draw out together become part of my research data for this study. Your contribution will be de-identified, which means nothing on the board will be linked back to you personally. If I take pictures, they will be of the board themselves, not of the individuals. And participation is voluntary. You're welcome to join in the discussion without writing anything down, and you can step out at any point. So by participating to this workshop, you are consenting to your de-identify input being used for this research purpose, and my contact details are on this slide and on the final slide in case you have any question afterwards. So the scoping review, I just walk you through, show what is documented in the literature. What it can capture is what people working inside the system experience and see every day, and that's where you come in. So there are three things we are hoping to achieve in the next 20-minute, half hour. First, we would like to validate the barrier I just presented. Are they accurate? Are there other modes that matter in your context? Second, we would like to highlight opportunities that aren't yet documented, things that work even informally. And third, we would like to identify practical entry points that are realistic and achievable given the resources, infrastructure, and relationship currently in place. So today's discussion is guided by two questions that we will explore one at a time. The first one is about barriers. In your opinion, what are the main barriers to provide aquatic food to school children in your country? And the second one is about opportunities. What could help introduce or improve aquatic food provision in your school food environments? We will walk through them in order, 10 minutes each, and I will set them up properly when we get to each one. But before we start, a quick word on the boards. I have set up two boards over there. Board one is for countries with a school meal program that run most days or on a regular basis, such as once a week, for example. And that include government-provided meals, such as national or externally funded school feeding program, school-based provision, like school-run meal, canteen or tuck shops, or community provision, such as meal prepared by parents for all students, village groups, or community initiative. And board two is for countries without a program where children get their food from home or when they purchase them from an external vendor. A few rules for the card. Write your country at the top of each card, one ID per card, the pink one for the barriers and the green one for opportunities. Each board is also split into two columns, so country where aquatic food are routinely served and country where they aren't. If you are not sure, just place it in the middle and I'll sort it out. So let's begin with question one. So in your opinion, what are the main barriers to providing aquatic food to children in school in your country? Please be specific. If something from my slides in the presentation resonate, please go deeper. If something is missing, please add it. Talk to people at your table, take the pin card and place them on the board that fit your context. There are no right or wrong answer. We just want to hear about your experience and just check if it aligns with the literature or not. We'll come back together in 10 minutes, and I will be moving around if you have any question. Better that one? Right. So quickly on question two. So this one is about the opportunities and entry point to providing aquatic food. We are particularly interested in what's actually feasible right now, given what you have in front of you. Resources, infrastructure, relationship, all of it. All that is an opportunity to put forward to the things that aren't yet documented, the idea that you think have real potential. Same process, just this time is the green card, one ID per card, country at the top, and you please place them on the board once you're done. Oh, yeah, and you can tell you that. Sorry, if you put a note on the thing and you haven't put your country at the top, would you mind go back and write it down? There is three that don't have a country. No. Yeah, I'll just put a. All right. So we are coming to the end. If you haven't put your sticky notes on the board, please do so now. And I'm going to conclude this workshop. So far what we can see is that there is quite a few places where there is a school food feeding program, which is a good news, and that aquatic food is not served very often, from what I can see from here, which is not much. So thank you so much. It's been very valuable, and what you have contributed today will be analyzed and then put together with everything else in my project to make my final thesis alongside with peer-reviewed publication and reports. The presentation slide and are already in the shared drive of the Talanoa, and then I will add the pictures of the board and a short summary after this session in the coming days. Finding from the broader project will be shared through publication, regional conferences, and report back to specific stakeholder with ongoing work through 2026 and 2027. And if you would like to be notified of our output or have any follow-up question, please feel free to contact me at the address that is down the bottom, and it will be on the shared drive on the slides, obviously. And just one last thing, I've been asked by the FAO to share that with you. So the FAO is running a global survey on aquatic food in school feeding program. There are currently very few responses from the Pacific. If you have a few minutes, please scan the QR code or visit the link on the screen. Your perspective is exactly what the survey needs to capture, as it ensures that the Pacific is represented on the global picture. Thank you all for being part of this today. I will leave this slide on the screen so you can also find it on the drive if you want to go back to it later. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Elodie. I was just doing a quick stroll past some of the sticky notes on the wall, and there's some really interesting points over there. And I don't know whether to, Elodie, maybe we can take some photos of what's up there and pop that on the drive so that people can see all of those different perspectives that are there, because I think I could see things around familiarity, which comes back to Tibio's presentation too, around that acceptability of some of these foods, and how do you think about integrating them into meals that are, I guess, if we say child friendly, or things that children might like to eat, but also lots of challenges up there too around food safety as well, which was also reflected in our presentation earlier. So we will get Elodie to take a snip of all of those and pop them up in a folder for you, so that you can have a look at those too. But I think there's some really great points in there. With that, I know that the other group will be coming back in here very, very soon, because we are right on 4:30. And so we've got a daily wrap up that Jess Ranieri is going to do for us today. So we're not going to get invaded while we're still talking. So thank you very much for your attention and your input as well. And like Elodie said, please reach out if you have any questions, and we'll make sure that a summary of those key points comes back through the drive for you, and what comes from the analysis of that as well.